Welcome to Evolve Here Now, the podcast for leaders who are advancing the meaning and impact of business success, full spectrum health, medicine, and high performance in all areas of life.
This is your home if you are a leader who is ready to step up your impact, inspiration, and personal evolution so that you can serve at the level you know you're capable of and beyond.
Join us now as we recharge, elevate, and accelerate you on your journey into this accelerated evolution community of the world's top influencers.
I'm your host, Talia Jacqueline.
I'm the founder, Satyan Raja, and once again, it's time to accelerate your evolution and your leadership.
Welcome to Evolve Here Now. This is episode number 9, and it's such a pleasure to have you all joining with us today. Everyone who's tuning in and who's listening, thank you so much for joining us. Today we've got Satyan Raja, the founder of Accelerated Evolution, with us. Hey, Satyan. And
hey,
we
Talia.
also have a special guest, Deb Maybury. And Deb and Satyan have actually known each other for a long time. I'd love for you both to share on your relationship and your interactions together. And I please welcome Deb. Thank you so much for being here on the show. Deb
thank you for having me.
Yes. Deb is a well-known author and a speaker and a facilitator and coach. She does a lot of things, actually. Singer-songwriter, filmmaker, which I'd love for you to share on. And Deb, you really specialize in helping people who are recovering from sexual abuse. So I'd really love for you to bring what you do to the table and just to share a little bit about where you're at and what you're doing and a little bit about your background.
Well, that's a really long answer. I could go on about that for a very, very long time. Let me just sort of in a nutshell sort of summarize where I am right now. 6 months ago, I asked myself the question, what would I be doing if I had 6 months left? And it's actually about the 7th or 8th month now. And I really sat with that question very seriously. And I decided that there were some things that were very important that I needed to do in terms of serving other people and evolving myself to sort of my maximum potential with what I have at this time. So that has evolved over the last several months into a film project, being involved in a play, the music, with always, the most important thing to me is always the service in my life, because it's so much more complicated and there's so many more opportunities in serving other people. So I've really pulled all the things, including being the author and being a coach, a speaker, and all those creative things, as well as the sort of therapeutic modes, and pulled it all together. And I was told a long time ago that I was going to be a jack of all things and a master of none, but I'm handling it, and it's all coming together just fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and that's just a scratching of the surface of your talents, because I know we go back way far.
I'd love for you to share about that, Satyan.
But why don't you share how we met, Deb, and really it would be good if I'd love to get your for you to share the context. The context of what we're speaking about today is really, especially focusing on your work with sexual abuse. I'd like you to share also about, in the context of that, our relationship, and also how really, what have you discovered about that whole dimension that needs to be said, that other healthcare professionals, other helpers, other coaches, other guides would be served by knowing. So I'd love you to share about that in the context.
Okay, that again it involves an awful lot. In terms of how we met, that goes back to 1985, where I was training Kung Fu in Toronto at the time, and my master at the time, Daniel Akita, who's a peer of Satyan's, he moved out west. And I was 18 months in, loving something, and just felt like I was cut off at the knees. And I happened to be moving to Brampton, which is exactly where Satyan's studio was at the time. And so I met Sachin originally there, just walking into that environment, very welcoming environment. And I started to train there. Oh, wow. And I continued on training there for several years up until I think 2003, 2004. And then I had achieved the sash, and moved on. Yeah, and I taught there for a while, and things just shifted, and I shifted, and it became much more broad what I wanted to achieve and accomplish. So I sort of went in different directions at that point, but we always kept in touch. I mean, Sasha, I can't remember when you went out west, but
yeah,
there was always that.
Yeah, for 13 years now, but we've always maintained a wonderful connection and friendship. So Talia and everyone, since 1985, 86, we've known each other, what, 30 years, 25, 30
No,
years?
95. Did I say 85? 95. Yeah, it was
so
90.
20 years at least.
Amazing.
Yeah,
and I've seen your progression, from, I knew you as a accomplished business person, creating, doing really well and growing your business, but also diving deep into personal growth, which is what we were focusing on in our martial arts school, as well as the physicality. And I saw your passion as you were going through the ranks. You're one of the first black belts that I awarded early back then, and you've continued that progression of learning and absorbing many different martial arts. But you've always wanted to do that, from what I see, not just for your own self, but to make a difference in other people's lives, to give them this sense of confidence, a sense of self-worth, and a command of their own personal environment and their boundaries. So I'd love you to share about that aspect, if you would, about what you've discovered regarding, especially from a point of a coach, as a guide. What can we as coaches, guides, helpers, how can we help people how can we help them find that self-empowerment? What have you discovered?
Well, the most important thing to me, and I've taught thousands, especially high school females, in my own style that I created called Realistic Self-Defense for Women, which I started to incorporate into what I was doing probably about 4 years into my training, because what I found in the martial arts and all the different styles, that there was never a style that was best for everybody, and certainly not females. And they were primarily being taught by males. And as wonderful as masculine energy is in martial arts, most males cannot relate to what some females have gone through in an aggressive way. So I think the most important thing that I learned as a coach was to really tap in to the abilities of the individual, and not just in a group setting. So I really would, when I teach, really focus in and watch where people's eyes are going when I'm talking about certain things. Watch their, how they're moving. I always ask, what would you naturally do, to your little brother if he's bothering you? Is that going to be a kick or a slap or a punch in the arm? And I always tell people to be okay with who they are. And as long as you have that awareness of what you like, what you love to do, your fears, then we can move forward and we can adjust individually how you want to evolve. First of all, if you don't see yourself ever fighting, why would I teach somebody how to fight aggressively? I'd rather than teach them something, speaking wise, because if they're not going to fight, I'm not going to train somebody to be a fighter. I'm going to teach them how to talk, maybe how to negotiate, how to reduce the odds that they could be in a place where something could happen to them. All these things are done before any fight has to happen in terms of protection. And, do you have a chime on your door? Do you have a chain lock on your door versus just a key lock, which anybody can get into? At least you're going to hear it, So I always look at the whole person as opposed to, first of all, what my agenda is, or what I think it should be for them. So I really try to get in touch with the people. And I know when I wrote Unlock the Door, which Sachin participated in terms of the harmony integration, the healing and the trauma component of what is taught in harmony integration is so beneficial with the people I work with. But I really wanted to, I don't know how to say, I really wanted each individual to shine on their own and allow them to shine. But it's my role as a teacher to help them flourish, support them in whatever way that they truly could benefit from. And then that's tricky, because a lot of people, they want to, really push, and almost, I saw that in martial arts where it's almost to the point of breaking somebody to get them to get to the next level. And when people have experienced trauma, that's not a wise thing to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good insight on that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm curious, Deb, what brought you to learning martial arts and diving into this work? What's the thing that drove you to that?
Well, the martial art component was very simple. I was 10 years old and I was watching Enter the Dragon, and I just saw Bruce Lee and doing all this kind of really cool stuff. And my brother was taking judo at the time, and I knew I didn't want all that touchy-feely rolling on the ground stuff. And I waited, and I hit 29 years old. 29 years old. It was February the 3rd when I walked into a studio, and I thought to myself, if I don't take martial arts now or try it, I will never be able to do it because I'll be too old. So I just decided, and that's the way I've always been, just make a decision and then just jump in and learn to fly on the way. And I did that. I just jumped in and I stayed with it. But it was really out of a sense of, I'm missing out. I always wanted to do this as a child, and I never did. And that's what's happening to me now, the creative, things that I'm doing now. And then in terms of with the Harmony integration, I just was ready to do something else with Satchan. Yeah, go ahead.
Chime in for a second. For those of you listening, Harmony integration is what Accelerated Evolution was formerly known as. So we talk a lot about Accelerated Evolution and the methodologies, and just so that you all know, it's the same. It's just it was formerly known as Harmony integration. So just wanted to clear that, but continue.
Yeah, thank you. So, I've been watching, Satchan talks about my development, and I think we've been sort of, going on this same journey in different journeys, and we've been evolving steadily. I don't know that I know another person in my life that has sort of been on this same path. I mean, a lot of people are doing a lot of things, but we just really seem to be doing a lot of things continually. And loving that. So when I got involved with that, it was more out of a sense of, I need to shift something. I need a commitment with something. And I'd followed Satchan, in terms of the Enlightenment and SPE and different things over the years. And I thought, what? And I love BC, and I'm going to, make a commitment, a significant commitment, a year commitment, financial commitment, and I'm going to grow. I want to meet different people. I need to get out of Ontario, and I need to just do some different things. And when I went out and I saw the different processing that was being done, I was able to immediately implement that into my life. And once I became a little bit proficient at it, I was able to utilize that with some of the people that I was working with at the time. And I just saw tremendous shifts in people. I just combined with other stuff. Well, I mean, when I decided to write Unlock the Door, I went to a place called the Gatehouse here in Toronto. And the Gatehouse serves adults or people over 18, there's a youth program, who have experienced childhood sexual abuse. And when I was starting to write the book, I wanted to make sure that Deb was okay. I thought Deb was okay, but I wanted to make sure that Deb hadn't suppressed what had happened to her as a child, because I'd experienced sexual abuse myself. So I thought, I'm going to go. And somebody told me about the founder, Art Lockhart of the Gatehouse, and I had an interview with him for my book. So while I was there, he kept kind of nudging me like, hey, Deb, why don't you, sign up and do the women's program? And I thought, you know what? I'm not going to take ego into this. I'm going to do what he said, because he knows a lot more than I do in this area. And the book had come to me basically in a dream and a vision. I knew I had to do it. So I didn't know what I was getting into. So as I
just share with everyone what the topic of your book is about again, just to put that in context.
Sure. It's called Unlock the Door Beyond Sexual Abuse, and it's an anthology. It's all different stories about sexual abuse. But what I focused on more than anything else, like, it's not a dirty detail kind of book. People will share generally. But when I started that and I did the interviews, because it's all in interview format, almost exclusively in interview format, I said, listen, this isn't about you and this isn't about me. This book is about healing. I want you to share your journey as if, and you are, further ahead of somebody else. You're further along the path. You're on the same path. But how would you serve the person reading this and put your story in this context? And I came up with the questions. That's why I designed the questions, because it was about, what did you learn, or what came to you after, 20 years of being an alcoholic? And, how did that serve you then? But it doesn't serve you now. Because everything that happens to us, there's a reason why it happens to us. I believe that. And it's a coping strategy. If you're an alcoholic, you don't beat yourself up because you're an alcoholic, but maybe it's not serving you now. If you used to run away, if you were on the streets, whatever you had to do to cope, maybe you've got tattoos everywhere because you're covering, maybe you've been cutting, whatever it is, good for you. I honor that. I'm not beating you up for that, because it got to where you are. And there are people that have taken their lives because of sexual abuse, because of the trauma is so deeply permanent, and you can never shake it. And if you can't evolve and integrate it, it'll probably take you down at some point. It'll affect your relationships for sure. It'll affect your working relationships, authority figures. It'll, everything. All your boundaries are completely messed up. Trust, you don't know who to trust or what to trust, or you don't trust anything. So the book was all about how can we serve and how can we share stories to help people move forward, maybe with a little bit more speed, as opposed to just stirring in that trauma forever. And the greatest testimony that I've had at this point was from somebody, and his name is J.P. Bedard. Actually, he's well known. He speaks out on sexual abuse now, but he was sitting, and he could not, he's a teacher, he could not go to work, he could not get off his porch or basically get out, and he somehow found his way to the gatehouse, and one of the first things he saw when he went in there was my book, and he picked it up, and he went home that night, and he hadn't been able to read for 3 months, and he writes, that's what he does, he's an English major, so he couldn't do anything, and he read the book, he opened it, and he read it, the entire thing, and then, Satya, it's like this thick, it's 420 pages. He didn't put it down, and it shifted him. It shifted his life, and so he went on this mission now, where he's a runner. He had addictions and whatnot, but he started running. He's ran, I don't even know, he's got like close to 100 marathons. He just came out with his own book recently, and we've stayed in contact all the time, and I've watched his progress from somebody who he just suppress and do all these things to mask all the pain for so long. And then he finally had a shift, and he realized, I'm not alone. And that's the greatest healer. And that's why I love group therapy as opposed to one-on-one. I mean, I think there's a place for everything. But when you're one-on-one, you're only hearing your self-talk, and you're only hearing your therapist. And it's the aha moments. It's the insights that we gain. One experience can change a person's life. And in group therapy, there you are in a group, 4 to 10, 12 people in a group. And everybody shares just a little bit. And you just see the shifting, because there's so much power in the words of another person that you just can't even believe it. I just finished recording a song called It's Not Your Fault. And this is what I hear all the time. People that have experienced horrific abuse, you can't even imagine some of the abuse, and they actually have that turned into somehow they're to blame, and they feel ashamed, and in the film I just finished, one of the lines in the film is about, you can have your shame back, you take your shame back, because it's not my shame, it's your shame. But to shift that in a client or in a group, it can be really tricky. But what people can see in a group is you can have 2 people sitting over there, and they're saying, I'm to blame, I'm ashamed, I feel guilty, I should have run, I should have left home, I should have never stayed, I left my brother, I had to get away. And they're just going back and forth. And I'm over here saying, no, but you did everything you could. And then everybody's kind of going, oh, I'm the same thing, I'm blaming myself. And if he did everything he could, and I think he did and she did, well, maybe I did the best I could with what I had at the time too. And that's the power. That's such a healing component in group therapy. Those moments are so vital and healing.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that, and especially the work that you're doing. I honor you for that. In the work that you have done, especially with the people that you've interviewed for your book and all the people that you've been working with, and you talk about how everyone had their own healing journey. Please share how you've seen the differences in those journeys of the clients you've worked with, and especially in those interviews, and even more specifically, how your experience with Satyan and the methodologies in Accelerated Evolution has added to the impact of their healing.
Well, I've worked with a few people that were in the book, and actually I'm probably 2/3 of the way through a documentary. So I've spoken to a lot of the people in the book to see their journey, and there's been so many shifts because in revealing that is so much, that aids to healing. Once you can speak about it and release it, and it's not the same weight anymore. It's incredible once people start to talk. The relief that they have.
Brene Brown says something about that.
Yeah.
How shame can only exist in secrecy. So that's right on.
Exactly. Absolutely. I'm a big fan of hers. She's very wise in terms of vulnerability and everything. It's incredible what she says, the research that she's done. One of the, we were doing what we call a phase 2. So that's a male-female combination. These are 16-week programs that people are involved in. And we had what we called the group 4,000. So we had, and this is when I had taken the course. So I had done 16 weeks with females, and then I became a facilitator, but I also continued on to get the co-ed 16 weeks. So after we finished that, this group of us continued going on. And this is when I started going back and forth. We'd done the interview session, and I've been going back and forth to BC, just started that. And one night, I thought, you know what, I know this well enough, and I'm speaking about the trauma process. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to go for it. And I pulled one of the gals aside that I got to know very well, and I said, you know what, how'd you feel about me putting you through trauma process? It's really short, afterwards we'll talk, and and I said, just trust me on this. And she trusted me. So it had to work, because these people that trust me, this is so incredibly important. I just rewrote part of the movie Hush, because the way it was coming out, the way the storyboard had been done by one of the directors was like, no, it's not going to happen like that, because it's too important to me, the trust that I have with these people. So this gal said, yeah, okay, Deb, I trust you. Look me right in the eye, I trust you. But I knew it would work, because I had done it a number of times. I had done on me for some things that I had, the charge had changed for me. So in front of the group, and there would have been about 12 people there that night. So I just asked them to hold the space. There's as much healing in silence sometimes as there is in talking. So I asked them to hold the space. I put this gal through the trauma process, and when she went in 150%, because she trusted me.
Yes.
We talk about the image and the thoughts, the body sensation, everything. She just poured it out, and have you ever seen anybody having projectile tears? Her tears were literally flipping out like this. I'd never even seen that before. She was crying so hard with so much pain, being in that moment. And I'll tell you, the energy around me, I could feel them slowly coming in to choke me. And if they didn't trust me the way they did, I'm sure they would have jumped on me because of the pain that I put her back into. But such a brief period of time. I mean, you carry this pain all your life. She'd been carrying this, and she wasn't that old. I think she was 24 at the time. Yeah. And this is she doesn't have a memory.
How would you describe that process, especially in the context of how you're sharing it right now?
Well, when I told them what I was doing, I said, we're gonna have something going on tonight. And I said, there aren't words for it, really. I said, but I'm going to ask her to go into her trauma very briefly, to the worst of the trauma. I want to go to the biggest part, the biggest impact, the biggest charge. And they were very reluctant to see that. And I said, if you don't want to stay, then don't stay. But if you can just hold on, we're going to talk afterwards. We're going to have a share afterwards, because this is going to be triggering. But when you see a shift, then you're going to see why I believe in this so much. So everybody just sat there, though the energy was pretty tense. And she, when she did that turn and she came out of that, her face completely shifted. she was just someplace, and she said to me very quietly something very, I won't even say it, but she said, this is better than when certain things happen in intimate moments. And she said she could feel it so intensely, the shift. And it was funny because somebody else that was in that group too, one night at another session, we were together, and I said, why don't we do that? Why don't we do that? Because you need to get rid of that. And he said, if you put me into any of my past, I may attack you. And I just looked him in the eye and I said, I'll kick your knees out. If you try to even come into my space, I will hurt you, for one. And two, you're safe with me. You're safe with me. You're not going to do anything. And he was so resistant, whereas the gal was very open. She allowed it to be. She went in 150. He was very suspicious of this whole thing. He just didn't think it was going to work. And in fact, he was so resistant. He came out, and I knew there was a shift because it works every time. And he was still, well, I'm angry now. I know, fabulous, because he's changed. He shifted where he was. He just didn't want to admit or, realize that the charge was gone. He went into anger, and sometimes people shift into sadness or anger, but that's why we have other processes. And I immediately put him into another one, and by the end I had him laughing. By the time he opened up his eyes, that was probably an hour later, because he was very resistant. He kept climbing up and going down and all over. He was fighting me. He did not want to come out of that and not have that energy that he went in it with, because he's holding on to that a little bit. And sometimes when people have victim mentalities, they do that. God bless their heart. That's what they've known. They've grown up. They've got those links wired in their brain where they're holding on to certain things.
Well, it's interesting you said that even a very resistant person, you had a very positive effect still within an hour. And my experience with traditional methods of helping people remove the charge or lessen the emotional baggage or the intensity so that they can have more of a peaceful relationship with their past, negative and positive stuff, all the way to trauma. This is the thing that I wanted to emphasize here, is about accelerated evolution, and paint the context, dial it in, that what you're sharing about is a process that we have in the framework of all the methods that we train. There's a particular process called the trauma release, and what that does, for those of you who are listening, in a short period of time, we help people go into find out where the root of their traumatic experience is, and then we have a very specific, deep, long-lasting process, which within literally minutes, the intensity of the charge drops, and for some people, right down to nothing, right down to zero. And so that means that they're not as shocked, they're not as tense, the trauma has been relieved out of their body. It's relieved on 4 levels of their being: images that they have, thoughts that they may be thinking about it, emotions that they have, and body sensations. So that just paints a picture, so you know that this is a very specific protocol and method. And the way you share about it, there is artistry, there's an art, there's a skill to it, other than just the actual technique. It's quite simple, but the space holding, keeping a feeling of safety, providing that safety, providing a strong, healthy container and a connection so that your client can bloom and touch these scary parts, but only be there for a few moments and then watch them evaporate right in front of them. It's literally like evaporation of that. That's how I experience it when I do the trauma release on myself. I've done it on injuries I've had. I've done it on scares that I've had in my life around my kids having, their challenges, or I've done it around intense moments in my personal life. So it's a very powerful and simple method, and I really feel anyone who's in the helping field can augment their practice by learning it, because it really helps you make your client at peace with something which they could have been struggling with for years.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. I mean, there's really probably 2 parts to that. One, that I really believe sincerely that it is something that absolutely works. But I also think that it's something that needs to be it needs to be utilized with other skills as well, depending on what you're working with. Because if you're working with somebody with a lot of years of trauma, you can work out in one area, like one say one event in their life, and you can basically break up that trauma for that event. But you have to continue to work with that. This isn't a one-off kind of thing with somebody like this. I've worked with somebody who was in a car accident, for example. That was a one-off. Once she broke up the charge, she was able to go back driving comfortably, and we didn't have to do more because it was one event. It was this car accident, hit from behind, and then when we did the processing, because we did two different components of it. So we broke up the charge immediately for the trauma. That was gone instantly. But then it actually kind of made her think, because when she was going through it, it made her think of some of the other accidents that she'd been in. So then I just used another process immediately, and then we got rid of that as well. So it's very important that you can flow with it, and that I think that the bigger the traumas are, then you need to be more schooled, and you need to feel comfortable, and you also need to have done the work on yourself. You need to go through this processing, and if you're somebody who's experienced something that you haven't dealt with, for example, sexual abuse is a huge one because there's so many people that have been affected by it. If you're going to work with somebody who's going to bring up sexual abuse, you need to make sure that you're okay hearing about it and thinking about it and talking about it and seeing these images and not be triggered yourself. So it's really important that you do the clearing work before you're trying to clear somebody else, because your energy can affect the person that you're working with. And this isn't just in this work, this is in any type of coaching or counseling. And I mean, I'm back at school to get a degree, in therapy. So, just so I can, the more credibility, right? And in Ontario, our laws are changing in terms of this type of work. So it's really important for me to do that, to combine it. But I've done so much research in this area, and just those 39 interviews for the book itself. Plus now I have probably about 1,000 hours in group therapy. And also there's a lot of hours one-on-one as well. You don't have to be a master of anything to do this work, but you need to have done your work and to do the reading within the area that you're going to work because it's such a responsibility when you work with people and you're talking about traumas. You really need to make sure that the person has a support. And if you're not the therapist, make sure they have a therapist that they can then go to somebody, or they have group therapy. It's not like I have to deal with everything. I don't. When I work with people in group, I'm not their one-on-one therapist. But if I'm working with them, it's my responsibility to make sure that they're being taken care of. It's not like I said, car accidents, certain things. If there's one incident, then you need less work. But if there's layers and layers of it, even if you chop the biggest one first, it's really, any professional knows this, it's your responsibility to make sure that that person has support. And one thing, for sure that people should have experience in or read about as well, because suicide is very common with people who have had sexual abuse and anything like, these gender issues and all kinds of things now. I mean, suicide is so prevalent among young people, and we really have to do the work. I mean, these processes are absolutely amazing, but you really need to do your work and to get yourself educated if you're going to do this work.
Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And that message is true. That's our message to any of the leaders out there, whether it be you're a doctor or a healer or a helper or of any kind. You have to evolve yourself first before you can truly. You have to build the capacity to serve, right? So it really starts from you. So beautiful. Thank you, Satyan. Anything that you'd like to add to that?
No, I'm actually quite moved by the degree of, how can I say, dedication that I've seen you take on in a real way. You really care a lot about people, and this particular show, this particular offering that we make is really about getting to the core of what are the essentials that make something work, and you're a living demonstration of that. So thank you. Really appreciate you coming out today. And for those who want to get in touch with you and what you're up to, can you share about how they can get a hold of you, and share, please, what you're up to?
Well, it's easy to get in touch with me if you Google Deb Maybury, debmaybury.com, Maybury. There's lots of different stuff. Over the years, there's started to be a good collection of interviews and about the book and whatnot. Currently, I'm working on a couple of things, 3 things. I'm going to school to just finished the first year, have a big exam to finish. So that's been huge. And that has really opened me up that there are more strange people just like me out there, because I go to the transformational arts school, and there's so many people with experienced so many things in the spiritual sense and visions and all kinds of things. And I thought I was just the only strange one, but there are many, many of us. So that's been huge. Meeting like-minded people with whatever you love to do is so critical to make that available to yourself. And so that's one thing. The other thing is I met somebody in the last fall, when I was asking myself this question about, what would I do if I had 6 months to live? And I got, the meetups, those meetups. I somehow got a meetup invitation. Forget this. Female over 50 lesbian guitar group. And I was like, how do I not answer that, respond to that? So I went there, and of course, then you have to play something if you're going to that group. So I played my song that's on YouTube called Little Girl, Young Boy. It's a video that I did a couple years ago. And when I sang that, the person who had actually done the invite, she was just kind of mesmerized. And she had written a play many years ago, like 20 years ago. And the play was called Hush. And so we started getting to know each other, and she asked me to write a song for Hush. She said she wanted to make it into a short film. She'd been sitting on it forever, and she hadn't been doing a lot in her life. And she came in, and I was just like at this tornado going and doing all of these things. And so it woke her up, and she asked me to write the song, and it just came. It just was like, oh, thank you. It's called Hush You. And if I'm on Facebook, just again, Deb Maybury on Facebook, and I'm actually going to be posting something tonight. Coincidence. So there'd be just a little clip of what's coming. It's all been kind of a secret in a sense. But so I wrote that song for her, and then she said, well, let's do the film. And I remember a few years ago, Satan, when on the bucket list we had, and I've always wanted to write a film. I have films, I have stuff in my mind, creative stuff that I've never put down on paper. You can't do this or that. You get to a certain age, and it's like such garbage. The opportunity presented itself for the first time. Somebody was actually asking me to be involved in a film project, and I just jumped, just like when it was, you want to ride across Canada. Yeah, jump. Hell, Les Brown says everything's either a hell yes or it's a hell no, and it was a hell yes on steroids, in fact. So the song just downloaded to me. She loved it. And so anyways, last week was my holiday, and forget about that, because I basically wrote the story. Well, I did, not basically. I wrote the storyboard. It's not the play. There's little elements of the play, and I redid all of that, and just had these, I just kept having these ideas how to bridge things together, and it's all based around the song. The song plays, except it cuts off at a part, and we have a critical scene in there, couple minutes. It's about it's a true story too. It's based on like a lot of people that I know, where the father was abusing the daughter, and the mother basically turned a blind eye to that. And this is from the time, all memory of this with this gal, until she went away to university. And so you can imagine the layers of trauma in that situation. So anyway, but I redid it, and I added in a lot of, I said, if I'm involved in this, the message is this: you're not alone, there's hope. How do we educate people and still give them an interesting product to watch without totally triggering them, without giving them any type of healing or hope in there? We have to instill that they can have a voice, and they can come back and have strength out of adversity. And how can they possibly do that? So I said all these components have to be in there. That's why We started filming on Monday. I saw the storyboard that had been put out by the director on Saturday. I rewrote it all, so it's all wrong. I just stayed up late, got up really early, redid it all, and went in and said, "This is how we're filming it." so,
That is awesome.
That's not a surprise though, because again, that's the trust. I can't be doing that. What was suggested, that's not going to fly. I mean, my credibility it's huge to me. It means everything to me. We were doing one of the scenes is out at the gatehouse where like all my peeps and then some other peeps were there to.
When do you think it'll be released?
It's going to be done in the fall. Right now, like we have one scene to shoot. We ran out of sunlight on the weekend on Friday night, so we're shooting one scene this Sunday morning, and then I'm going over to the gal that did all the filming, myself and the co-producer, and we're going there to look through the footage. But I kind of watched it because I also was seeing the first few clips how they were done. I was like, no, I want to see this and this. So I was just going one hat, putting on the other hat. Okay, I'm doing this. Oh no, you're not going to change that. And it's just like.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Well, you'll have to have us out. You'll have to have us out to there's got to be film festivals in Vancouver because it's going to be 8 minutes long. I think it's going to be closer to 15 with the added content that I put in, and it's film festivals. So we want to get into film festivals and show this. It's very powerful. Right now we're in communications. We were going to edit it ourselves, but it's a high enough level that we're trying to get somebody else. And my co-producer, Megan Hutton, knows somebody in California who's done phenomenal stuff. So if that comes through, that would be fabulous because I already know how the progression is. But to get those changes, I mean, I'm just flying.
Well, you're taking it to the world now. You're taking this message out in a bigger way, and you're stepping forward even more. And that's been really the focus of both our lives over the years, is to keep making an impact, step up even more. I want to thank you for being here today and sharing your wisdom, your expression, and everyone knows now how to get in hold with you. DebMaybury.com. Talia, did you want to share anything to complete today?
I just want to give you my own honoring. I know Satya acknowledged you, but just such a deep honoring for what you do and for your own story, like what you've shared on here, and for doing the work on yourself, like really investing in that to help others. It's just so beautiful. So just thank you for all the work that you do and the people that you help and heal, and it's just really beautiful. So I'm looking forward to seeing your film as well, and just watching what else you're up to. And thank you so much for your time and for sharing everything that you've shared. It's been so beautiful. Thank you for being here. Yeah.
Well, you're very welcome. Pleasure to be here and spend some time with you. See you again, Satya. It's been a while. And I look forward to seeing you again and following, what you're both doing.
Definitely.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.